I want the Eurocentrics to take a look at these three faces right here. Some of these faces might be familiar, or you might not know them at all. One thing is for sure, they're the bane of your existence, Eurocentrics. This right here is a trinity of Egyptology. And they have some things in common. And one of those things happens to be a black Egypt, and presenting evidence of that, and putting Eurocentrics on notice that your little game is over and that it's embarrassing. So who are these people? Well, we have Maria Gatto, Dr. Stephen Quirke, and the Grand Master, Dr. Ashton. And all three of them are going to let you know explicitly that it's game over. It's time to give it up, Eurocentrics. You see, this little insecure game you've been playing this whole time, it's only damaging yourself. It's not doing absolutely nothing to us. That's for sure. Therefore, if you guys have been with me so far on this channel, you see that I have built a foundation, a 4-point foundation for this fact that has been established of a black African Egypt. And the four corners of that foundation are the British Museum, the Petrie Museum in University College London, Fitzwilliam in Cambridge, and then, of course, Manchester. And what we're looking at right here is a synthesis of this foundation right here. We see that the British Museum has learning resources, and it tells you in its learning resources that Egypt has every right to be considered an African civilization. Cambridge printed its own resources and had an exhibition called Black to Kemet, where they let you know exclusively that the very idea of ancient Egypt and the people there were originally black, and that you guys need to give up this game now. And then, of course, at Manchester, we had the conference that was held there at the museum, and they went pretty deep there. And, of course, the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology in London, yes, that Petrie, regularly holds events that explore ancient Egypt alongside other African cultures. And they don't mean as a white society alongside other African cultures. It's like Dr. Quirke, who was the curator there and is now a professor at University College London. They're talking explicitly about a black African society is what they're talking about. And then there's the virtual Kemet gallery on the Fitzwilliam's website. And we also see that they put the Black Power comb next to the comb from Abydos just to put a visual metaphor. Some of the words that they like to use are visual proof. And so what they want to do is create a visual metaphor for Eurocentrics, so they cannot tear away any black person from Egypt. You can't do that, all right? They've put you on notice. You see it before your eyes. It doesn't matter how many comments you make. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, okay? Speaking of these combs, look at what the man Petrie himself said. The early European combs of the Bronze Age and onward are entirely different from the Egyptian examples. And that is true. Like Dr. Ashton said, we don't find this type of hair pick in any cultures outside Africa. But we're not here to talk about combs. You see, this picture right here, that's the Fitzwilliam right there. Cambridge University. It's Eurocentric places like that that have now changed their tune and have now decided that it's time to stop lying now. Because one of the things that they all agree on is that this is bringing Egyptology down. There's no other discipline where people are just outright lying and want to argue all day. You guys don't take anything Roman and want to argue about that. You don't take anything Chinese and argue about that. You guys won't take anything and argue about it. It's only ancient Egypt because it came before any European civilization. And so you're mad. But that's too bad. We can't sit around here babysitting feelings anymore, Eurocentrics. Okay? Here we see yet another example. A poster advertising the Egyptian galleries at the World Museum. And you see that it just keeps going. And so what the Eurocentrics need to understand is that slowly but surely they're letting people know that ancient Egypt was originally a black society and that the culture itself was born from an African pool of cultures that a whole lot of stuff came out of, and ancient Egypt just happened to be one of those things. That's something that you need to get through your head now because it's now established. Phoenician number 7 trying to tell me about science being established, there's absolutely no evidence that they're supporting anything that you're talking about. Phoenician? Okay? And so we got to move on now and start exploring these doctors right here, okay? So before I start, let me remind you people that Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, the man himself, was appointed the first professor of Egyptology in the UK in 1992 at University College London. He is considered the father of Egyptology. Let's get that part established right now, okay? Also at that place were Sir Francis Galton and Carl Pearson, among others. And there at University College London, like they say in their resources, is the full span of Egyptian history. They got all kind of stuff. So you do know that, right? And originally that museum was not intended to attract and interest general visitors. It was intended for study and teaching purposes. And I just wanted to make sure that we establish the pedigree of this place. And so this brings us into Dr. Stephen Quirke. He has a bachelor's and a PhD from where? Cambridge University. He was a research coordinator at the Petrie Museum. All right? And it was when he was there that he worked in a capacity on the Black to Kemet there at Cambridge. All right? You see that he's also a teacher. He's a course coordinator. And he's also a professor now. He has plenty of publications, and he also has students underneath him too. And to show that I'm a transparent person, always make sure that I provide email addresses and direct phone numbers and the physical addresses to these people's jobs, so that if you have any problem with what they're talking about, you can go and talk to them instead of leaving me a comment, because I don't give a damn about your comment. All I do is just laugh at you and just shake my head at your insecurity. All right? Because unlike Phoenician number 7 and Super Egyptian, I'm completely transparent, and I'm not here to lie about anything. I don't need to lie on YouTube. I'm not a loser like you freaks. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm here to teach the proper history. But we got to move on. Dr. Quirke, he's the same guy who manages Digital Egypt for universities, which is University College London's website specifically for Egypt. That's 3,000 pages of information and photos for you Eurocentrics to go and look at. But just remember the position that they're coming from as you're looking at that, okay? So Dr. Quirke, he was present at Black to Kemet in 2009. You see the year 2009, it means this has been over for years, you guys. You guys been putting out videos all these years, and it has affected absolutely nothing. You left 10,000 comments since then, and you haven't changed anything in real life. Here we see that Dr. Stephen Quirke, along with who? Dr. Ashton, worked together to support and present a lecture by your nemesis, Dr. Shamarka. What was the topic? Biological anthropology. This is the same Dr. Shamarka that you guys have made 1,500 videos for. You tried to debunk him, but at the highest levels, he has been accepted. Okay? There's nothing you can do about that anymore. It's because everything that he wrote was absolutely right. Do you understand me? There's nothing you can do about that. We got to move on now. And so here on this slide, we see that Dr. Quirke, he has his own students, and you see the level that his students are at. The cult of Ptah at Thebes. Look at the second supervisor on that. David Wingro. The person and society in Kemet, look at the second supervisor on that, Kevin McDonald, a champion of West Africa, mind you, okay? And we just see that Dr. Quirke is qualified to be a teacher at a high level. And so we see that Petrie's curator at the museum that was named after him was there at Black to Kemet, and he was also at Egypt in its African context at Manchester. They included later a printed volume of the stuff that was talked about there. And look at who we have here. Stephen Quirke, University College London, the home of Egyptology. And I don't think you guys are going to like what he had to say. Now, before I go into what Mr. Quirke had to say, let me remind you that Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie was appointed the first professor of Egyptology in the UK in 1892 at University College London. We got to establish our authority here, all right? And so on to Dr. Quirke. What did he have to say about all this? He says here, even a Northwest European writer must recognize that the name Kemet holds particular powers, the people of the Black Land. In this evocation of life force, the word Kem, black, instantly asserts a positive strength, unlike the Indo-Europeans who usually try to associate blackness with badness. That's only in your little minds. But anyway, like he says here, Kemet becomes a powerful expression to oppose the racism that infects Europe from the genocidal history of colonial enslavements. He's keeping it real with you Eurocentrics, man. He's embarrassed by your guys' attitudes. Look at that. And here we see he sees all the way through to the Black Power movement. And again, they put Black Power next to the pre-dynastic Egyptian comb as a metaphor and a visual proof for Eurocentrics. There's nothing you can say about that. There's no debunking of videos to be made about that. You see, they're not going to put a European comb next to that and then talk philosophically about it because there's no reason to do that. All right, Eurocentrics, there is no more debunking. There is no more arguing. We've had 200 years to figure this out. It's over now. All right? Just get on the team. And so when we see Heraclius right here, through the third dynasty, we now know and it has been established that that was a Nilotic city and that the ideas that were born in localities like this came from the Nubians. I suggest you go back and watch my Manchester videos where we went into detail with that. But we're going to go into more detail with that today when we talk about Miss Gatto. But we got to move on. So what else did Dr. Quirke say? He says that Kemet has become a contemporary key for exposing white mythologies. I couldn't have put that better myself. White mythologies, the white fantasy that you guys were dressed in Egyptian costumes and running around doing something. You didn't do absolutely nothing. You had absolutely no effect on the culture that developed into pharaonic culture. That in and of itself had nothing to do with you absolutely whatsoever. So when you are a groupie and you're fantasizing about Egyptian culture, remember that that's a African culture. All right? And look what he says. Look at the words that he uses on here. It might be best to ignore the Eurocentric field. Here we have an Egyptology Grand Master at Petrie's home telling us it might be easiest to ignore the Eurocentric field. He talks about the nihilism that has been strong in European thinking and how you guys are unchangeable. Look at how he talks about you guys. Okay? He goes on to say that putting all this stuff into print form, as you see here, it can then be circulated through library networks, inside and outside archaeological departments, and this encourages disciplinary and non-disciplinary readers to encounter a wider range of views. And look what he says is a major omission. He says that there's little chance of progress without who? The participation of modern inhabitants of Africa in general and of the Nile Valley from source to sea, which is a problem. Because you see guys like Super Egyptian, Phoenician Number 7, and all the rest of these little Eurocentric little YouTube channels that they created, as a form of white therapy, they completely and utterly just ignore the Nile Valley Africans. They act like the Sudanese people don't exist, except when it's time to talk about them getting ran over by Egyptians or something, you know, and they just pretty much just disrespect these people and act like they never even existed before. And it really is just a slap in the face, you know. That's why I always make sure that I mention and put forth first the Nile Valley Africans, because you guys have been ignoring them for damn near 200 years and acting like they just showed up yesterday. No, you just showed up yesterday. All right? And so again, Dr. Quirke, you can see that he was at Black to Kemet. He was there to support workshops with Dr. Shamarka lecturing on biological anthropology. So you see that it goes deep. All right? Let's see what else he said. If anyone is to be missing, to be absent from the table, surely it should be the white Europeans and not the modern Egyptians and Sudanese. You see what he says right here, and he is absolutely right. If anyone is to be absent from the table, surely it should be the white Europeans, not the modern Egyptians and Sudanese. This right here is a slap in the face of how you guys try to tear any black person away from the history of ancient Kemet, when that is our Greece over there, our Rome over there. That's our version. And constantly, you guys are committing cultural imperialism. And it's like Dr. Quirke says, he knows, man, that if anybody should be absent, it should be the Eurocentrics, you guys. Okay? Phoenician number 7, you don't even belong in this conversation. And you're like someone who stands up in the middle of the room, they're in the middle of a lecture, and you just start giving your own lecture. But nobody asked you to speak. You feel me? If you don't like it, you can call Dr. Quirke yourself and talk to him about a Black Egypt. Okay? Ask him about the Egyptians coming from Anatolia somewhere or from Russia. Okay? He ain't going to tell you what you want to hear. So have a good day. We got to move on. And so here he talks about a journal that was anchored in support from universities in Martinique and Cameroon, among other places. And so we see here a connected African-centered studies of ancient Kemet across Africa, America, and Europe. And he was saying that it's all time to start working together now, because it's time, you know, to start telling the right story, you know. You see, we got Cameroon mentioned here. And then also at the Black to Kemet, they had workshops where they had Dr. Mboli, who himself was a PhD out of the Congo, all right? And they always make sure they include a little bit of everybody in this discussion, you see. And look what he says. The power of print means that face-to-face meetings, as at the Manchester Museum Conference, need to be followed up with publication, as well as with further meetings and discussions within and between groups. So what they're saying here, what this doctor is saying here is they're going to keep developing this, and that we need to keep developing this. All right? And then you see that he says we need more black people involved in this discussion. All right? And then look at that box right there. When you put stuff in print, writers materialize together on a level in a way that can make it easier to absorb the full range of their individual writings in combination. And that right there is the synthesis of my entire channel, is to get all these people together, and then I put it together in a way, in combination, that you can understand ABC. There is no debunking. Have a good day, Eurocentrics. All right? And so we're going to finish up with Dr. Stephen here, where he says very eloquently, Kemet needs not more of the European, but of other worlds, of those living in the valley today, those speaking languages related to theirs, and those who feel linked to it by the history of the continent. And there he speaks to all black people everywhere, all right? Where he says, we need more of that instead of more Europeans, because the Europeans have done nothing but bring Sumerian theories and all sorts of Mesopotamian and Arab theories, and all that stuff has just been slapping the Nile Valley legacy in the face. But we got to move on now to Dr. Gatto. Here we have Maria Gatto, who will tell you that Egypt was originally born from the Nubians and people from the Sudan. And again, if you don't like what she has to say, I have her phone number right there. I have her email address. All right. You can contact her yourself and ask her why she's talking about a black Egypt. And so let's go into her qualifications before we take a look at what she said explicitly. All right. There at the College of Social Sciences, Arts, and Humanities, she is part of a world-class international team of scholars who are engaged in cutting-edge research and teaching. Nation number 7 is coming to me talking about what science has established. That's why I said that you're a straight up liar. There's no way that you look at Egypt this damn much and don't see this stuff. This is why I said I got to come with high quality research here. All right? You see that Miss Gatto, and it's absolutely true too. Part of a team of scholars engaged in cutting edge research and teaching. And you see what it says there. They deliver undergraduate and master's teaching to the highest standards. You see that, right? 100% staff enthusiasm, 95% outstanding student satisfaction in 2015. All right. So back to Maria. She is at the ERC. She's an ERC research associate for the Trans-Sahara Project. She completed her undergraduate and graduate's education in archaeology at Sapienza University of Rome, where she received her master's degree in 1993, summa cum laude. And what was it? A dissertation on the prehistory of Nubia. And she knows Nubia. In 2001, she got her PhD in African archaeology. Remember that, all right? University of Naples, La Orientale, with the research on ceramic traditions and cultural boundaries in the late prehistory of Northeast Africa. And let's remember the cultural boundaries too, because she speaks eloquently about cultural boundaries, you know, unlike the Great Wall of Africa that Eurocentrics have created across the Sahara, where there's no black people allowed. No, there's no such thing as that, unfortunately, for you guys. Anyway, after being rewarded her PhD, Maria went to where? The British Museum as a research curator for pottery collections. And she was a museum educator, a lecturer, a field archaeologist, and a ceramic specialist. Remember that, all right? In 2008, between 2008 and 13, she was at Yale University, and it was in that capacity is when she went to Manchester, and she held positions in Near Eastern languages and civilizations. And she was an associate research scholar and lecturer in Egyptology, as well as in anthropology as a research associate. Since 2005, she has co-directed in Egypt the Aswan Kamambo Archaeological Project, co-sponsored by Yale. All right, so I'm just reading that so we can establish her authority, all right? Her research mainly focuses on processes of inter-regional interaction and cultural contact in the valley, Central Sahara, social complexity, and early state formation. This is all relevant for what we're about to talk about. Nomadic pastoralism and what? Social complexity in pastoral societies, which is where we get our kings of Egypt from. She's also a master of material culture, particularly ceramics and rock art. And this all goes hand in hand with what she says. All right. She also knows a lot about the Garamontes too. You guys try to call them a white tribe. Nope. She'll tell you about that sub-Saharan component. And then she has some further reading materials. You can go and check these out on your own. But one of the papers we're going to take a look at today is cultural entanglement. We're just going to do a quick little rundown of what exactly that she said. So you see right here that she's taught a variety of courses in Italy, Egypt, and the United States to undergraduate and graduate students. What a super Egyptian ever taught? Nothing but lies. She has supervised graduate students on their master's and doctoral projects, and she's been published widely on the field of Nubian, Egyptian, and Saharan prehistory and archaeology. And she's taken on extensive fieldwork experience in North Africa, including Libya, Egypt, the Sudan, and Eritrea. And she has a long and continuously evolving record of conference participations. And right there on the right side of your screen is a living example of her long and continuously evolving record of conference participations. And you see, at Manchester, at the proceedings, Maria Gatto observed that the Nubian pastoral culture had a great deal of influence on ancient Egypt's social development. What else does it say? That she convincingly demonstrates that the Nubian pastoral nomads were the African ancestors of Egypt, and in addition, even played a role in the origin of the entire African pastoral tradition. So here we see more information being passed from the Nile Valley. The way you guys like to just hate, and say that never happened. No, it didn't happen for you. You guys were hanging out in Europe. Have a good day. Bye-bye. And we also see that the flow of information didn't go just one way, as is often assumed. Because we got to remember that the Egyptian culture was an African culture, all right? We got to remember that. That's where it came from. And she also clearly demonstrates Nubia's role in the social development of Africa. All right, so moving on. There at Manchester that day, she had a paper on Nubian pastoralism and the birth of Egypt. And what she said there, she said that what can be safely stated is that at this stage, evidence points to an earlier presence of Nubian population in the area of Nagata. And she says, I quote, as a matter of fact, and she says that a lot, 5th millennium BC, Tarifian, Tazian, and Badarian cultures were Nubian related. You see they've known this since 1928. And also this relates to findings of the same age from the eastern and the western desert. Remember that. That's everywhere in Egypt, all right? And look what she highlights. I quote, that is to say, and this is something important to highlight, that the cultural substratum in Upper Egypt as a whole is mostly Nubian related. Have a good day, Arabs. Have a good day, Eurocentrics. Bye-bye. The earliest evidence of the Nagata culture is attested in the royal city of Abydos in the region of Nagata. That region over there is the earliest evidence of Nagata culture. And you see she says that Upper Egypt as a whole is mostly Nubian related. And again, this is in concordance and goes hand in hand with what Proust and Lavelle said when they said that the high status ruling elite segment over there at that cemetery was more closely related to populations in northern Nubia than to the neighboring populations there in southern Egypt, which again points us in the direction that there were Nubians there, or people related to Nubians, that ruled over the people in Upper Egypt before the pre-dynastic period. But we got to go, all right? And so we see this little rock drawing right here. This was from Cultural Entanglement. And you see that there's a bow. That little symbol of the bow is in that man's hand, which is the symbol for Ta Seti, the land of the bow. And you see what she said here. He is not an enemy, but a high-ranked person participating in the royal jubilee rituals. I just put that there right now just to add a further layer. And so we're going to take a look now at what she said at Manchester in her paper, Nubian Pastoral Culture. And she says here that Egypt, as an African country, was directly involved in the cultural dynamics of its continent, has been broadly accepted. Get over it, Eurocentrics. Have a good day. All right. She talks about the formative period of the Egyptian civilization and when the social identity was forged. You know, the social identity that you guys put on your movies and stuff because you wish that was you. Yeah. And I also like how she lets us know about the irrelevance of your little race-based theories. Okay? And here she says, as a matter of fact, most of the activities connected with the Neolithic package in other areas of the world, meaning Caucasian, including pottery, were already present in Nubia when you showed up. All right? Thank you very much. Look what she says, too. The arrival in Africa of domesticated sheep and goats from the Levant around 6000 BC confirms a local and earlier domestication independently of cattle. And she says again, in fact, only populations already able to manage domesticated livestock could have adopted the newcomers so easily, spreading them very rapidly all over the Sahara. And when we say all over the Sahara, we mean to the Atlantic Ocean, all right? All the way over there to the west, all the way down to South Africa, everywhere, all right? She's letting you know that explicitly. And so we got to move on. When we want to talk about agriculture and these cattle, let's remember that linguistic stratigraphies all right, when looking at linguistics in Africa, we got to remember, she sees right here, she reveals how terms connected with cattle herding are older than those associated with agriculture, chronologically placing their origin at the beginning of the Holocene, which is where we need to look again. So so now we know that was about 10,000 years of history that led us to those pyramids. All right. And so again, with Phoenician number 7, what goes on and on about these sheep and goats that were coming to Africa and these plants. Again, who cares? All right. Thanks for bringing it, but that's not responsible, man, for the birth of the culture. Have a good day. There's no need to make videos about that anymore. All right. And look what she says. The commonalities between the Nubian Neolithic on one side and the Tazian, Badarian, and the Neolithic of the Khartoum on the other are the result of their strong ties. How many times I got to tell you that? All right. So we see the Tazian and the Badarian cultures were, of course, also influenced by other surrounding societies, but they were not as influential as the Nubians in shaping their cultural identity. And we all know that the Badarian, Tazian, all of that developed into the Nagata. All right. So let's remember that the next time they try to find another excuse to tell us the custal incense burner was actually some sort of Egyptian thing that was made by Egyptians, given to Nubians, and then traveled around. So let's keep all this in mind when we see the custal incense burner and we see the white crown of Egypt, we see that kneeling prisoner, we see the falcon, we see the rosette, and we see the damn boats going towards the palace. Okay? And then we got to ask ourselves, where's the Europeans' kneeling prisoner? Where's the Europeans' white crown? Where's the Europeans' falcon? Where's your rosette? Where's your palace at? You had none. This is why you're so insanely jealous of the Nubians and you punish them every day. But you can't punish them because it's already done. It's already over. This is why you guys want to be Egyptians so bad. And the satisfaction is incredible, man, as we take a look at this stuff. But we got to go on, all right? And so essentially, to sum up Ms. Gatto, what she tells us is Nubia is Egypt's African ancestor. And what linked Egypt to the rest of northern Africa is this strong tie with the Nubian pastoral nomadic lifestyle. And it was this same pastoral background that is commonly shared by most of the ancient Saharans and modern sub-Saharan societies. Have a good day, Eurocentrics. Bye-bye. You don't belong here. Thus, not only did Nubia have a prominent role in the origin of ancient Egypt, it was also a key area for the origin of the entire African pastoral tradition. Do you see how they bring everyone African under the same bosom with Egypt? It's like you can just gather everybody and everything African together and just put Egypt in the middle and just gather it all together. That's what they're doing now. Eurocentrics, it must make you so bad. You know, that's why Phoenician number 7 makes fake slides talking about they are Caucasian point blank. Science has established this. They haven't established a damn thing, liar. And so, going back to Dr. Gatto, she talked about the Nubians and what became Egyptians had originally been the same people, but then you start to see a contrast because you start seeing political power being concentrated, right? And we know about Egypt's metaphor for order over chaos. How we start seeing the Nubians primarily represented in Egyptian imagery as captured enemies. But we got to remember that stuff was flowing and going in different directions, and we should never look at anything in a monolithic point of view. Like one of these trolls left me some little comment talking about, to my understanding, the Nubians were only allowed in Egypt to trade. Some Nubians were, and at certain times there were people that were not allowed to cross certain lines, this and that. But overall, you got to remember that all the Nubians were not all together as one big country. Okay, there were friendly Nubians, and then there were Nubians that like to beat on the hornet's nest. And there's multiple directions here. All right, that's why Ms. Gatto says in her abstract for cultural entanglement that new archaeological research in the Aswan area has revealed that the process of cultural mixing in this boundary region, clearly detectable in the cultural material, was much more complex and multi-dimensional than previously thought. So you guys come up with these little basic storybook theories to make yourselves feel better about Egypt, but that's not going to help you. I'm sorry, man. All right? With the rise of the Nagata culture, Upper and Middle Egyptian society took a separate pathway from Nubia. However, Nubian elements in Nagata material and beliefs became less and less visible, but there was always a Nubian component still detectable during the Nagata period. All right? So what you start saying is the Egyptian culture is now becoming independent from the Nubian culture, but there's still a Nubian component there. Okay? Let's remember that part. And then you see where she says right there in print that she has clearly demonstrated that the first cataract was not a real border super Egyptian. Have a good day. Bye-bye. You just look like a clown if you want to keep on saying that. All right? And so again, when she talks about multi-dimensional and being complex, it's like this rock art drawing right here from the pre-dynastic. This man is not an enemy, but he's a high-ranking person participating in the royal jubilee rituals. And the bow on his hands is the symbol for Tasiri, the land of the bow. Okay? Again, multi-dimensionals that we're talking about here. And since you guys don't want to shut up about your phony Arab brothers who you claim are your white brothers when they don't give a damn about you, let's take a look. First of all, stop talking about Sumerians. They were too late. All right, you got to go back to the Ubaid period. Remember that Stein's interpretation of the Ubaid expansion in the Near East emphasizes how the spread of the group's ideology is a result of an outgrowth of long-standing interregional contacts and not, as you guys used to think, of migration, colonization, or domination. And it's true. These Ubaid people, they did not have a professional army, and they weren't going around colonizing, dominating anything, or migrating anywhere. These were just interregional contacts. That's how that stuff started spreading, okay? And besides, it's like I told you, in the pre-pottery Neolithic, I exhibited it and showed you evidence where it said explicitly that your little Caucasian friends over there in the South Levant did not punk each other. There was no evidence for that. And also, their level of social stratification was not even close to the Nile Valley Africans' level of social stratification. And that's just something that's just got to get over, man. All right? This is why, they tell you on the little Wikipedia page about your little dynastic race theory that it has strong supporters in the first half of the 20th century, but unfortunately, it has lost mainstream support. What part of that don't you understand? That's why you guys suffer from cognitive dissonance. You go on the little videos, you'll say, well, the Egyptians weren't white, but they weren't black either. They were actually more like Arabs. Like, you can't stand up there in any place of higher education and say that and not get thrown out the building. They're going to usher you away from the damn podium talking like that. All of a sudden, the Arabs are your little friends, but every other time, you guys want to blow them up. Have a good day, freaks. All right? There's no such thing as no damn Arab Egyptians. You guys got to get over that shit, okay? That's just how you wish it was, all right? Just because you want to hate on the black people, but that's too damn bad. It's been established. Bye-bye. We got to go on, man. I can't drag on. Once again, let's listen to Ms. Gatto in Cultural Entanglement, where she says, as previously stated, it is highly unlikely that the arrival of Nagata means migration of people from the north, colonization, and domination of the local communities. Here we see how many times have they got to tell you guys, man, that this was a local development. There was no magical little people that came from the Caucasian Mountains. There was nobody that came from Mesopotamia dominating anything. So instead, what we see in the Nile Valley is a set of shared beliefs and practices on both the personal and public levels. This has been identified. They talked extensively about this. Okay? So you guys are sitting up here with your little European fantasies of European Egyptians, but there's absolutely no evidence for that. You can't demonstrate that across multiple disciplines. So what they did was they have conferences like this to demonstrate it for you, and then they start clowning you and telling you to get over it. All right? They've pulled rank on you freaks. And so her conclusion in Cultural Entanglement was that the distinction between an Egyptian and a Nubian identity is something connected to the rise of the Nagata culture. And that during the previous millennium, the 5th millennium, such a distinction would not have made sense. And it wouldn't have, because they were all the same people then. As previously stated, look what she says, the Tarifian, the Badarian, and the Tazian cultures of Middle and Upper Egypt have strong ties with the Nubian Nilotic pastoral tradition. This all goes hand in hand with what Wingrove said in Cultural Convergence. He said the exact same thing, that from Khartoum to Middle Egypt, it was all part of the same cultural horizon. And getting back to Ms. Gatto, you see she says that we can infer all of this by the very similar pottery, the economy, and the settlement patterns, and also by the latest findings in the deserts surrounding Egyptian Nile Valley. And so we start seeing this Egyptian identity during its creation. It was instrumental for justifying political power, of course. Now, may I remind you that Maria, after being rewarded her PhD, she worked at the British Museum as a research coordinator. She is a ceramic specialist, a museum educator, a lecturer, a field archaeologist, all of that. Did I remind you that? Okay, so let's remember that when she tells you similarity in pottery. And here you can see that Nubian and Badarian pottery is pretty much exactly the same, or is a variant of each other. You can see that, all right? So that's what she means when she says very similar pottery and very similar cultures. This is what they mean when they say that Upper Egypt as a whole was Nubian related. That's what they mean. And here you see it in your face, okay? I know time is slowing down for you and you want to start crying Eurocentrics, but that's too damn bad, man. That's why we sit up here and we laugh at you, man. You know what I'm saying? And look down on you because you guys are nothing but groupies. But let's move on and add some more layers to this. And so in cultural entanglement, Ms. Gatto says here that the consistent occurrence of Nubian elements in the material culture of Nagata, and also the shared sacred and ritual spaces in the natural settings, is more evidence of this. And again, as we see more Nagata elements rising up, there's still that Nubian element that's still present. And then we start seeing the development of something new. You know what I'm saying? And look what she says right here. The base of the entanglement process. These two cultures were entangled together, okay? And the base of that entanglement process is identified and detected with identity markers that coexist with each other. Identity markers that coexist with each other. And these are acknowledged by both groups. The appropriation and elaboration of specific elements, you know, like the white crown of Egypt, right? And here she says how they have different forms of materially entangled identities, such as the Nagata red polished bowls that have a Nubian milled rim decoration. So again, here we have a physical coming together in the archaeology, all right? And look what she says. The growth of the elite system in Egypt during the 4th millennium created a stronger centralized control with the need for a more consistent presence of Nagata symbolism, ideology, and iconography on the ground. So what we now see developing in Egypt is more independence, their own little symbolism, their own little ideologies and iconographies, so that they start developing their own thing, right? And then gradually we see a disappearance of the Nubian markers from the record, and it becomes more Egyptian, you know what I'm saying? But just remember that it was originally Nubian, and that the Nubian evidence is older than Egyptian, period, all right? And again, so we're going to take a look now at what she means by this, by the growth of the elite system in Egypt, and how these people were culturally entangled, all right? So this goes hand in hand with what she just said, okay? Tracy Prowse and Nancy Lavelle wrote a paper. There's their pictures. I was showing you how they look, all right? They wrote right here in this paper, the high status people, the ruling or elite segment at Nagata is more closely related to populations in northern Nubia than the neighboring populations in southern Egypt, okay? So let's remember that these people that were either Nubians or strongly related to Nubians were the original ruling population there at Nagata. And not only that, at Heracleopolis, Abydos, all that. Okay? When you put all the information together, that's what they tell you explicitly, that these were not Nilotic societies. They were not Arabian societies. They were not European societies. They're not having conferences and writing on this anymore. Okay? And putting it together like this. All right? Only thing that you Eurocentrics have are your little Eurocentric studies that are nothing but a bunch of research bias. But again, I'm gonna go ahead and just add more layers to this. All right, let's add more layers to this. Let's go back to what Ms. Gatto said. What can be safely stated is that at this stage, evidence points to an earlier presence of Nubian population in the area. That we had the Tazian and Badarian cultures were Nubian related. So are findings of the same age from the western and the eastern desert. That's everywhere. And she also says that it's something important to highlight is that the cultural substratum in Upper Egypt as a whole is mostly Nubian related, and the earliest evidence of that is that the Nagata as attested at Abydos in the Nagata region. Okay? That'll remind you that after being rewarded her PhD, that she became a field archaeologist and a expert ceramic specialist. Let's remember that. All right? And let's not forget that Ms. Gatto is on a team of world-class international scholars who are engaged in cutting-edge research and teaching. Remember that, all right? Okay, so getting back to what she said about this earlier presence of Nubian population in the area, and that the Tazian and Badarian cultures are Nubian related, and that the cultural substratum in Upper Egypt as a whole is mostly Nubian related. All right, this goes hand in hand with what Dr. Shamarka said 25 years ago, and this is why he is invited to these places. The Nagata and the Kerma series are so similar that they are barely distinguishable in the territorial maps. They subsume the first dynasty series from Abydos. Goes hand in hand with what she said that the earliest evidence of the Nagata culture is attested in the Abydos Nagata region. And it goes hand in hand with what Proust and Lavelle said about the elite segment of the population there was more closely related to northern Nubians than the neighboring populations in southern Egypt. See how it just goes on so many different levels? All right, we got to move on, all right? So again, we see the Custal incense burner. We got to burn this into your head. They have the white crown. The pure mountain over there is the white crown and is the throne of the two lands. You need to look up the pure mountain. As a matter of fact, go to my video about Saharka, and I go into explicit detail about the pure mountain. That's another video that's going to leave you in tears, but hey, I can't spare your feelings, freaks. We got to move on, man. And so eventually we start seeing the growth of this elite system in Egypt during the 4th millennium, and they became more and more centralized, and we start seeing more consistent Nubian Nagata symbolism, ideology, and iconography, which eventually becomes Egyptian. And so now that we have that developing, we have other people now. All right? And since Egypt is now in opposition to the others, and we start seeing this boundary region in the Nile area around the first cataract, you see what she writes here. That would have been strongly and consistently challenged. And let's remember that when we see Lower Nubia being depopulated around the time of the first dynasty. All right, let's remember that. These people were a threat. They tried to make it seem like these were all a bunch of doofuses hanging out and they were no threat to the Egyptians. They were a threat. They were ruling in Egypt, okay? And those original rulers there in Egypt, of course, they came from that area, so they know how those people were, all right? And that's where we start getting that those two little separations there, all right? And so even though we start seeing that, we see right here, Southern Nagata, that there's still a consistent occurrence of Nubian elements in the material culture, especially in the sacred and ritual spaces and natural settings, such as the socially stratified tombs. All right? So now we see how now it's developing in the ancient Egypt, but we still have Nubian elements there. All right, and so we start seeing the fluidity of group affiliations in these boundaries areas. And what this happens is it produces integrated and new identities. This is where we get ancient Egypt from. So we have two different groups, like, or related groups who modify, create, and syncretize their cultural markers to produce an integrated new identity in their cultural context situation. All right? And this is eventually where we start getting the Egyptian pharaonic culture, or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to identify that is, the Nile Valley culture. This is how that starts developing. And right here in the red box, examples of that cultural entanglement are things such as the Nagata red polished bowls with the Nubian milled rim decoration. All right, so now we see that they're entangled now. And now we're starting to see a Egyptian identity coming up. And here, since Phoenician number 7 likes to show close-ups of Rahotep's face, let me show you a close-up of this. That is to say, and this is something important to highlight, that the cultural substratum in Upper Egypt as a whole is mostly Nubian related, going back to the Abydos region. Have a good day, Eurocentrics. You need some tissue? And again, this is all in concordance with cultural convergence in the Neolithic of the Nile Valley by David Wingrove. And that was out of University College London and University of Oxford, just so you see that. And you see what he says right here, that the horizon of cultural change belonging to the 5th millennium BC links Egypt's early development firmly to that of its southern neighbors in Nubia and the central Sudan. That was the point of that entire paper. And you see what it says, throughout the entirety of the Nile Valley, a remarkably consistent set of concepts. And we see the spatial and temporal distribution of specific, once again, cultural practices focus on the body, and that the beginnings of a distinctly African context for the later prehistory of the Nile Valley may yet come into focus. So we see how at multiple levels in time and space, we see that they've all come to the same conclusions now. And this same David Wingrove was also a part of an absolute chronology for early Egypt. I use that in my part 3 of my Manchester video to show that the Sumerians were not more advanced. The Mesopotamians period were not more advanced than the Egyptians. I suggest you check that video out. But anyway, let's get back to Miss Gatto. Overall, what this tells us is, like she said, period. To sum up, Nubia is Egypt's African ancestor. Get over it, all right? You guys got to get over that now. The Nubians were the original Egyptians, man. They were ruling in Egypt, and then they became Egyptians. That's what happened. We finally found out what happened, and we already knew that. We didn't need Maria Gatto or Dr. Ashton or Stephen Quirke or a conference or an exhibition. We didn't need none of that. We didn't need them to tell us that. We've been saying that stuff for years, going back to our own teachers, all right? Been telling you that for years. But again, now we just get to wipe it in your face, man. We just take shit on the garbage can and just throw it in your face, Eurocentrics. Too damn bad. And I want you to remember that not only did Nubia have a prominent role in the origin of ancient Egypt, as stated in print by Miss Gatto at Manchester University, it was also a key area for the origin of the entire African pastoral tradition, the same pastoral background that is shared by the ancient Sahara and modern sub-Saharan societies. Why? Because a lot of these modern sub-Saharan people were originally in the Sahara. You got to remember that. There's 5,000 years of history that you guys conveniently like to skip over, but that's a whole nother video. And so all of this was stated at Egypt in its African context, held at the Manchester Museum, University of Manchester in 2009. That means that before Phoenician number 7 and Super Egyptian even started making videos, that this stuff had been slapping Eurocentrics in the face already. You know, that's why I say that it's a joke that they want to sit up here and make these little videos and think that they're going to change something. This is why I call myself black to reality, because we got to get back to reality here, man. You guys are living in this little fantasy and trying to punish us. You know what I'm saying? But you can't punish us, man. You can't, all right? You're only punishing yourself. I mean, you guys are sitting up here, you're so insecure about ancient Kemet because your ancestors wanted to be like them and looked up to them. Well, that's too damn bad, freaks. We got to move on now to Dr. Ashton. All right? Yet another grandmaster in the game. All right. She puts in so much work for Black Egypt, man. All right. One of the things that I like about her is that she can identify any portrait of any Egyptian king anywhere. And she'll tell you that this Nile Valley Sultan right here is a black man. She says on her blog, Kemet Expert, that if you look at his facial characteristics, he has the facial characteristics of a black African. She'll tell you that, all right? And she's absolutely right. We look at the statues, we'll tell you that's a black man. You say, oh no, this and that. Be quiet, you're a bunch of babies, all right? Anyway, she runs the blog, Kemet Expert. It's dedicated to African-centered Egyptology. And basically, she focuses on African-focused approaches to this ancient culture because it's like she says, it's African. And look what she says at the bottom right here. It is to understand this culture, it's necessary to draw parallels from other indigenous African cultures, which goes hand in hand with what Ms. Gatto was just saying, right? Right. Let's look at Dr. Ashton's qualifications one more time. Bachelor's in Ancient Greek from Manchester. Wow. BA and MA in Classical Archaeology, King's College London. She's undertaken research for a PhD in Egyptian archaeology. She has worked as a researcher in the Department of Greek and Roman Antiquities at the British Museum in London. She was a curator for a Cleopatra exhibition, and she also undertook original research in the field related to Cleopatra, on top of that. And then she moved to the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology. Yes, that Petrie Museum. At where? University College London, as a researcher. So that adds even more layers to Petrie. And she was then appointed as the senior assistant keeper in the Department of Antiquities at where? The Royal University of Cambridge University. And she had curator responsibilities there until 2015. And while she was at Cambridge, she obtained her MPhil in criminological research. And then she is also a grandmaster in investigative psychology. And she uses that psychology to break Eurocentric behavior down, too. You don't want to hear what she has to say about that. Anyway, she's currently studying full-time for a second PhD in psychology. And she uses that psychology, again, to break down the Eurocentric mind. And she feels sorry for you freaks, but not me. Anyway, she's published, again, a bunch of books and articles on a wide range of subjects relating to Egypt and Sudanese cultures. And she's undertaken her own archaeological and anthropological field work in all these countries. Egypt, Sudan, Libya, Greece, Italy, and the Caribbean. And then, of course, her most recent work is on the history of African hair combs. And as you see, that's an Ashanti comb right there. And she is the person that's responsible for putting Black Power next to Black Power of pre-dynastic Egypt in Abydos. Okay? There you see it. And again, that's a metaphor. It's a sign. I keep trying to tell you freaks that they're sending you guys these little signs to tweak your mind, to get you to realize that what you're doing is wrong, man. It really is. But you guys don't care about wrong or right. That's why I've been sent here to punish you freaks. All right? And also, on her blog, Kemet Expert, she is, again, I'm transparent. She's transparent. She says if you have any questions or feedback for her, she'll get back to you as soon as you can. You can go there, ask her yourself. Don't ask me. All right? And so the redemption of African history is now. And we're going to be taking a look at what exactly Dr. Ashton talks about. And her blog, Kemet Expert, is a good place to look. And she says right here that she is not unique amongst UK Egyptologists in seeing ancient Egypt as black. All right? She says that. And she also speaks on removing, Phoenician number 7, Super Egyptian, all you freaks, removing many of the Eurocentric interpretations that have been placed upon this ancient African culture. Thank you very much. And she says by using the original African names, we immediately resuscitate the ancient culture and its people. And again, this is why I tell you that the Nile Valley culture, it lives with African people. It's alive. For you guys, it exists on a page or video. All right? So let's see. She also mentions how Kemetic culture has much in common with other African cultures. How many times we got to tell you that? And then she talks about using things in the proper context, which you guys are notorious for using stuff way out of context to try to prove a phony point. And like she says, use it within the appropriate cultural context, please. Let's see what else she said. She talks explicitly about the appropriation and the unauthorized theft of ancient Egyptian culture by non-African people. And that is exactly right. So the next time you go to Washington, D.C. and you want to take your little tourist photo of the Washington Monument, I want you to remember this channel, Amazing Black People, and how that is a legacy of not only Africa, but the Nile Valley Africans and every single damn black person that you ever disrespected. It was divine providence when Martin Luther King stood in front of that thing and gave that damn speech. Remember that. And speaking of context, you see how she writes here again how easily an Egyptian symbol can be used out of its original context and by what? A culture that had no direct link to the original. Many cultures that had no connection to ancient Egypt have used Kemetic symbols for their own purposes in order to try to connect to a more powerful ancient civilization. And she's talking about you, Eurocentrics, and your unauthorized theft of ancient Egyptian culture by non-African cultures, man. Okay? And look what else she says. Non-African cultures have been keen to disguise the African origins of ancient Egypt or Kemetic culture in order to claim them as their own. Phoenician number 7, trying to steal the history, man. This is exactly what I say. All these times you guys been trying to say that we're stealing history when you guys have absolutely nothing to do with anything. You're living in the Kukatini house over there at the pit grave culture with the Yamna people on the other side of the Caucasian mountains. This is why you guys dress in Egyptian costumes and always want to copy black people all the time, man. Because for thousands of years, you guys have been looking at us and basically trying to copy us. It's a fact. You know it. We got to move on. Let's see what else Dr. Ashton was talking about. She says, as with Egypt, here she's talking about the Sudan. As with Egypt, she said she feels it's important to make a distinction between the ancient people and those who live in the region today. Yes, they were a whole lot blacker back then. Believe that. They still are. But the cultures, the religions, the languages, and also a large percentage of the population has changed considerably since ancient times. So let's remember that the next time Super Egyptian wants to show you a picture of an Arab in a turban and wants to imply that that's a Nubian. No, have a good day. We got to move on. And so she's the one who was talking about, let's remember that she worked at the British Museum and she was the one who hipped us up to the learning resources on the British Museum's website that say explicitly that it was an African civilization and deserves to be considered African. All right? So let's remember that. And yeah, here you see on this slide that Egypt is less frequently studied as an African society. The focus is on evidence from objects, especially tomb paintings. Of course, these are the teacher's notes right here. And here she uses the term in actual fact. That some of the pictures of the people of Kush have the same exact skin color as Egyptians. We've been telling you this for years, and you just want to sit up here and be trolls and just argue for no reason, though. And look what we've been telling you. Like the people from Kemet, their skin tones vary. We told you over and over again, we show you pictures, cognitive dissonance kicks in, and you say, I don't even know what you're talking about. You guys are a bunch of sick, jealous freaks. I got to move on. You see, now when she uses the term in actual fact, you know, it's like, look what Maria Gatto says right here, where she says, as a matter of fact, most of the activities connected with the Neolithic package in other areas of the world, including pottery, were already present in Nubia. Again, that's a little tweak to Eurocentrics to let you know to stop what you're doing. All right? Look what she says at the bottom. Again, in fact, only populations already able to manage domesticated livestock could have adopted the newcomers so easily, spreading them rapidly across the Sahara. That's so you guys can stop arguing and keep trying to say, oh, we brought domesticated plants and animals in and sheep and goats. Good for you. We got to move on. So back to Dr. Ashton. What else was she talking about? She was right here. The denial of African heritage and achievement has a long-standing history. Such racist ideologies were used to justify the colonization of African peoples and the appropriation of African achievements. That was just a comment that she had left in answer to somebody. Okay? And that's some pretty damn explicit stuff that she's saying, and she's absolutely right. Racist ideologies that are used to justify the colonization of African peoples and the appropriation, the outright theft of African achievements by not only whites, but Arabs too, most definitely. All right? They make up stories too. And again, you can tell that she's completely embarrassed by people like Phoenician number 7, who sit up here and make up stories and make videos all day long with specialized graphics because she feels bad that her ancestors live in the Kukutini house somewhere in the Ukraine. Again, that's not our problem. That's your problem. All right? And so, let's see what else she said. The Egyptians themselves range between light and dark brown. You guys keep talking about light skin, dark skin, this and that. That shit is all irrelevant. Again, you guys are insecure, man. You see that picture up there with the 4 figures? You guys made that up. That's a fake picture. It's been exposed. Stop drawing your own pictures. And then I made sure the 3 pictures on the bottom, I wanted to show how an Egyptian can have any sort of skin tone. It's just exactly like she said. It's exhibited. What she said is exhibited right here by me. Light brown to dark brown. Stop getting petty. Goodbye. And so there's also, she's the one that was responsible for the dedicated, you see it right there in print, dedicated online virtual Kemet gallery that straight up says Black to Kemet on it. All right. And she made this as a part of a community focused project where she worked with the Black community. Okay. And she developed that. And I put these pictures of Amenhotep and his son up right here just to show Phoenician number 7 that whatever it is that she's trying to talk about, man, is irrelevant. You talking about you don't believe they're Caucasian, they are Caucasian point blank. Man, you need to stop making up stuff. You sound like you 5 years old. You really do, playing with action figures. All right, like you got an imaginary friend or something. All right, and as you see here, these people are clearly Black. We've been telling you that. I don't need no damn glasses. You're not going to tell me that I'm pretending like I'm seeing something. Okay? We knew the whole damn time these people were Black. Look at Amenhotep. Look at his damn statue's damn face. Look at that. Come on. This is at the height of the Egyptian Empire in the 18th dynasty. It's like these kings, their riches were incredible at that time. People came to Egypt and bowed down. Your fellow Caucasians did. We got plenty of evidence of that. Okay? And then you see that little Nubian we have right there, that little Nubian picture next to Amenhotep's head up there. I just wanted to put that up there just to show you that how much darker on that representation of Amenhotep is than that Nubian. So you can get off of anybody being lighter or darker. That shit is irrelevant. Black people, all kind of colors. Get over it. Besides, that ain't you anyway. So, Phoenician number 7, this is why I told you that you're a joke. I'll laugh in your face. If I saw you in real life, I'll laugh in your face. All right? And so, this brings me back to my foundation, Fitzwilliam, Manchester, the British Museum, and Petrie's home, University College London, and his little Petrie Museum of Archaeology and Egyptian archaeology over there. And again, when we put it all together, man, there's absolutely no way that none of these Eurocentrics is going to debunk me, absolutely whatsoever, because there is nothing higher than what I've presented here, okay? There isn't, all right? There's an absolute limit, all right, when it comes to the things of this earth, physically, all right? And this is the absolute limit. The ceiling doesn't get any damn higher. There's absolutely no way that a critically thinking Eurocentric can honestly still believe in an Arabian Egypt or a white Egypt. Stop using the Arabian Egypt as an excuse to spite us. You can't do that. And besides, you haven't stopped absolutely nothing. All right? They're not talking about Arabia to Kemet. They're not talking about white to Kemet. They're talking about Black to Kemet. All right? They don't put a turban next to the comb from Obidos. They put the Black Power hair pick, that same shit I can use in my hair right there next to Egypt as a metaphor. British Museum, the wealth of Africa is ancient Egypt. Get over it. The Petrie Museum in London regularly holds events that explores ancient Egypt alongside other African cultures. Not only that, they've had 2 curators that have explicitly and outright said the ancient Egyptians were a Black African civilization. That was their culture. Okay? And then we have, from the man Petrie himself, you can find his publication, Objects of Daily Use. You can find it and put it in your hands himself. And he said that the Egyptian combs were entirely different from European combs. All right? So, Phoenician number 7, instead of lying to me and thinking that you're going to shut me down, which is not simply not going to happen at this point. Why don't you go ahead, go to the Black to Kemet virtual gallery over there, and to the Fitzwilliams website virtual gallery. Check out that Black to Kemet little gallery that they have there, and all the pictures are just basic Egyptian pictures, but it's all stuff that you've argued about for as long as you've been around, and we keep trying to tell you, you can't argue about none of that. You simply can't. All right, it was not born from Europeans. I don't know why you guys want to be Egyptian so bad. Does it really matter? How come Alexander and Julius Caesar and all that, how come that's not good enough? You guys are completely greedy. That's what it is. And then they try to divide different African people up and then try to tear them off from this and that. All of that, in my opinion, is purely satanic, because you're not contributing to the progress of world history. You're holding it back. And that's what these people are doing. This is why they're working to, or trying to work on changing the curriculum, telling these TV channels to stop making these fake reenactments, all this stuff. They've now pulled rank, put you freaks on notice that it's time to give up this little fantasy now. The storybook is over with now, all right? The story's done. You guys had a cool little... You guys have had a good 150, 200 years pretending that you were Egyptians. But that stuff is over with now, okay? This really has gotten to the point where it's like talking to children, man. Where you guys have your little Halloween costumes on and you wish that you were Egyptians and you wish that you created everything. But really, it's childish and it's just time to get over it, man. All right? So next time you go to Washington, D.C., and when you see that Washington Monument, just remember that is poetic justice. That is poetic justice at its finest. I want you guys to remember that, all right? But those are the three Egyptology doctors that we have there who have all said some pretty explicit things, all right? Phoenician number 7 thinks that nobody white is going to talk about anything explicitly about a black Egypt. But as you've seen on this channel, I identify all of it and I present it in front of you and I do it transparently, okay? So let's remember that. So as you take a look at this picture right here, I want you to remember that black power and remember that Egypt is black power. All right? Until next time.